Hello and welcome to Philm Phuckery, the unhinged podcast where I romanticize the villains, ship anything with queer tension, and obsess over films that are either genius or deeply cursed, sometimes both. I'm your host, Spencer Jones, and this season we're diving headfirst into the chaotic comfort that is the MCU. As usual, we'll be moving through our topics of villain effectiveness, gay undertones, consistencies and inconsistencies, technicalities, and of course, the most chaotic moment. So let's dive into it. This week we are talking about Captain America, the Winter Soldier. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, and if you're not, I'll post it on Instagram and TikTok. I try to do a Winter Soldier style makeup look. I like to crochet a lot, and years ago, I crocheted a Winter Soldier sweater, and I thought I still had it. So I did this makeup look thinking, perfect, I'll wear my Winter Soldier sweater. It'll be a whole look. I think I got rid of it, and I'm kind of bummed that I did that. I worked really hard on it. I don't know why I would have done that. And if the ghost that's hiding it in my house somewhere decides to bring it back to me somehow, if I never got rid of it and they just took it, I'll post pictures of it. But I do have a video of me there's like an iconic Winter Soldier knife stabby thing that he did that was going viral on TikTok when I made the sweater. So I have a video of me doing that from years and years and years ago. So I will post that as well. So anyway, that's why my eyes are an insane amount of black all over. I try to do like a Winter Soldier smoky eye thing. I don't know. Anyway, let's just dive into it. Okay, so villain effectiveness. This is the movie where all of the Captain America stuff is coming together. So we've already had Avengers where all of our previous first off movies are coming together so we can understand the aliens, and we're still learning about the Infinity Stones. But this is the movie where all of our lead up to Hydra comes together. So we've learned about S.H.I.E.L.D. and what they're doing, and we've seen some shady shit going down, and all of the counselors are kind of assholes. We learned about Hydra from Captain America, First Avenger. This is just kind of where it all comes together in that aspect of it. We learned that Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., I guess. It's kind of like a little virus that just spreads everywhere. So S.H.I.E.L.D. is now falling apart, and I think it's pretty cool. That's one of the things I love about the MCU is that everything happens for a reason, but they all blend into each other. That's why you have to watch all of them, or otherwise little aspects won't make sense. That being said, the first time I watched this movie, I think I watched it in theaters when it came out. I wasn't as into Marvel as I am now, and I think at the time I had only seen the first couple of movies. I had seen the Thor movies because my stepdad really liked those, and the Iron Man movies, of course, but I didn't really piece them all together. I didn't know that you had to know what was happening to understand the next movie coming out. So anyway, I saw this movie in theaters, and I was so confused because the whole point of the movie is not to trust people, because we learned that S.H.I.E.L.D. is Hydra, basically. The first time watching this, I was like, Nick Fury told Captain America not to trust anybody, and then he comes back from the dead, basically, and Steve is trusting Natasha, and they're trusting Maria Hill. The first time I was watching it, my anxiety was peaked because I was like, you can't trust anyone. How do we know we can trust Nick? How do we know that he's one that we can trust when he says don't trust anybody? How do we know that Natasha's a person we can trust? How do we know that Maria Hill's a person we can trust? How come when Nick Fury dies and comes back, we trust him still? And I understand now that it's like those are the main characters, so you are built to trust them, I guess. But the first time watching this, I was like, he told you not to trust anybody, and here you are trusting people. That was crazy to me. Looking back, I understand now who you can and can't trust in this movie. It makes sense knowing the other movies and knowing who our main characters are and everything. But like, wow, the first time I watched it, I was like, is no one else freaking out right now? Like, everyone was like, yes, it makes sense that he would be doing that with Natasha and they would be working together. I was scared. So anyway, this is the movie where we find out that Dr. Zola has put his mind into a computer, which in Captain America, the First Avenger, I was pointing out the fact that the first time we see Dr. Zola, it's in a magnifying glass. And I was like, I wonder if it means that later on he puts his face into a computer, whatever. I don't know, but I thought it was interesting, and this is the movie where that happens, so that was cool. And then what Dr. Zola is doing is he is infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D., and he's basically putting that little virus into it, and he made the algorithm that looks at people's pasts and what they're doing now and determines later on if they're going to be a threat to Hydra or anybody, I guess. I think it's interesting that that is what everyone's okay with, and I guess they're all indoctrinated into thinking that, because it's like little bugs all throughout S.H.I.E.L.D. just telling people, I don't know, it's like a cult. You don't know how you got into the cult, you just are sometimes, you know what I mean? It's very persuasive, and that's the whole point. But I think it's really interesting that people just go along with that. They're like, yes, let's take out any potential threats even before they're a threat. And I find it interesting that even Nick Fury, we trust him, but I also think that he is built for intelligence. You know, he's so shady, and we learn to trust him because he's a main character and he generally does what's right, but he does what's right even if it's in a morally gray area. He does what he thinks is right, you know? So Nick is really okay with the idea that they're going to point a gun at the world just in case somebody is a threat. I find it interesting that Steve is the only one against this that we see. I'm sure there's other people against it who maybe don't know about it because it's kind of like a high clearance thing. But it's just so interesting to me that Nick Fury is like, well, obviously this is what we're going to do. We're going to take out threats before they're even a threat. And Steve is like, that's not freedom. It's just kind of an interesting concept. And I think I'm siding with Steve, obviously. Freedom is not free if you're being threatened at all times. You know what I mean? It just doesn't seem to work because you can't guarantee that someone is a threat until they are a threat. And it kind of sucks, but that's what the Avengers are, you know? And I'm kind of spiraling right now, but I just think you can't stop bad things from happening unless you know that bad things are happening, which means the bad things have to happen. You know, I hope this makes sense, but it's like they have to be the Avengers. They can't be the stop people before they're bad-ers, you know? So then a side aspect of Hydra is the Winter Soldier, Bucky, who we meet in this, and it's really exciting. I love Bucky. He's so badass. Like, he's built for being a soldier, obviously. That's literally what he's been trained to do because he was a soldier, and then he was made to be a Hydra soldier, and he was given the metal arm because his arm fell off. Anyway, I think he's really cool, and they've brainwashed him, and they have those trigger words that they use to trigger him to be the Winter Soldier, which I think we find out later. But it's very interesting and very sad when Steve is like, Bucky? And he's like, who is Bucky? And he's kind of snapping out of the Winter Soldier mind a little bit. It's just so sad to see him kind of remembering things and being like, oh, I wasn't always this killing machine. And he feels sad that he has to be killing innocent people, you know? It's just really sad. So I'm glad that later on he snaps out of it because Bucky deserves so much better than being the Winter Soldier. It's so sad. I also realized this was a really small part of the movie, but they say that Tony was helping with the airships that were gonna point all the guns and take out all of the threats. He kind of just offhandedly helped them with the engines, like gave them ideas. And that was kind of interesting to me. Like, they didn't bring that up again, but Tony inexplicably helped Hydra build guns to point at everybody. And one of the guns was aimed at Avengers Tower. I couldn't read what it said. It went really fast and I couldn't pause it fast enough. But one of the guns was pointed at Avengers Tower, and I'm assuming it was at Tony Stark. I think it said Anthony. I could be wrong. Let me know if I am, but it's kind of interesting that he helped build those just to be a target. Anyway, as a whole, I think Hydra is a really good enemy. And like I said in the first Avengers, I really like their motto that you cut off one head and two more will regrow. It's very accurate to what they are and what they do, you know? I really liked the concept of them infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. It's very culty and it's very politically shady, which I think makes sense for such a high up intelligence bureau like S.H.I.E.L.D., you know? It makes sense that that would happen at some point. And it's a good thing that they figured it out and that they were able to stop it. Imagine how much longer it could have gone on if they had just been more subtle. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to move on because I don't really have a lot to say about Hydra. I think they're effective villains and I think they're interesting, but it's not a one specific person. Unless you want to talk about Pierce, but he's just like some old white guy who's controlling everything, you know, big news, whatever. So anyway, we're going to move on to the gay undertones. This is the movie that introduces, I wouldn't say introduces, because there were a little bit of gay undertones in the first Avenger, but Bucky and Steve, I think this one is the one where Peggy's out of the picture now because she's old and dying. It gives Steve and Bucky time to explore their little gay relationship. So first, before we even see Bucky as the Winter Soldier, Steve is walking in the museum, just like looking at all of the exhibits, being sad about Bucky dying, being sad about Peggy being old. And the guy narrating the museum thing for Bucky was like, Bucky and Steve were buddies since childhood and they were inseparable. They fought together side by side in the war. It's just very gay, I think. And I'm right. So anyway, when we do see Bucky as the Winter Soldier and his mask flies off and it's so dramatic and he turns around and Steve is like, Bucky? He freezes because, okay, even if it wasn't gay, which it is very shocking. Can you imagine your friend died 70 years ago, over 70 years at this point, in a tragic accident falling off of a cliff? And then you freeze for 70 years. You come back, everything's different. Your girlfriend's dying. And Bucky is back, also having been frozen. They're like the same age. Not a lot of time has passed between them. It's very shocking. So I would freeze too. But also, he froze because his boyfriend's back. And that's a shocker. And he doesn't want to fight him. The entire time, he fights off Bucky, but he doesn't fight Bucky. And I think that's an important distinction because he loves Bucky so much. And he's not going to fight his best friend. He's not going to fight his boyfriend. Another moment that I think is really funny and very proving that they are in love is the kind of end scenes where they're on that last airship. Steve is trying to get the chip in and he's fighting Bucky and it's very tense. And at the end, he tells Maria Hill to fire on the ships even though he's on them. So the ship is being fired on and they are plummeting to their deaths probably. And Steve is trying to save Bucky from underneath that giant metal thing and trying to regain his memory. And he would rather get the shit beat out of him by a literal other super soldier with a metal arm than fight his boyfriend. They're so in love. Bucky isn't at this moment in time, and that's because he's the Winter Soldier. But when he becomes Bucky again, he loves Steve so much. Steve was the only one who could bring back his mind, his memories. That's a very special and deep connection that not a lot of other people could do. So they are in love. I think this movie is where we're given the opportunity to see their relationship kind of blossom again. But when we get to Captain America Civil War, that is when the gay pops off. That's when Steve would move mountains for Bucky. He would cross to the end of the world for Bucky. So I can't wait to get there. But this is really the formation of that. Again, you know what I mean? Because Peggy's out of the picture, so he can focus on Bucky now. Our little small thing about them before I move on is I think it's really funny that both Steve and Bucky went to the museum to just like hang out. And I mean, Bucky was going to figure out who he was, but I also think it's just kind of funny and very vain that they are both hanging out in a place that's describing them as these great, amazing heroes. Steve specifically, it's very vain. And I know he kind of did it as like reminiscing of Bucky and Peggy, but it's just very vain of him to be sitting there staring at things about himself in a museum, you know? I thought that was silly. Anyway, another small gay undertone, and it's not as prominent, I think, as Bucky and Steve, but I do think it's definitely gay. Sam is so in love with Steve, and I think it's really sweet, and I actually think it's kind of sad because I like Sam a lot, and I want him to be happy. He is so in awe of Steve in every possible way, and it's not just in awe of he's a super soldier, that's so cool, this is Captain America. He's like ride or die for Steve. They didn't even know each other that long. They like met running, and then Steve shows up to his little support group and he's talking to Sam and they're getting closer and closer and closer. Sam is immediately ride or die for Steve, and I love that. He literally was like, I got out, I'm not going back into the service. And then Steve is like, I kind of need your help with something. And Sam's like, I'm on it. I got you. I'll be there. Like, I don't even care. He's so in love with Steve. I think Steve just sees him as a best friend. And I think that's really sweet and beautiful as well. But he's got eyes for Bucky, so he can't be looking at Sam, you know? Okay, these last two things are my gay undertones. It's really just me complimenting the women in this movie, but Natasha, I've said it before and I'll say it again, she's such a badass, and she's so smart and clever. The end of the movie when she's at the hearing with everybody and they're like, where is Captain America? Why would you do this? You know you could go to jail. And she's like, okay, put me in jail. You won't because y'all need me. She is that girl and she knows it. And I love that for her. She's so cool. Anyway, the last thing I have for gay undertones, and this is just a warning for everybody because in the end credit scene, we're introduced to Wanda and Pietro. And y'all, if you thought I was insufferable with Loki, just you wait until Wanda is in these movies, you guys, because oh my God, she's my favorite character. It's gonna be really bad, so I just want to warn you guys because I will nonstop talk about her for hours if I could. I love her so much. She's my absolute number one favorite character in the entire MCU, and oh my God, I'm so excited to start talking about her now because she was introduced in the end credit scene. So this is just a warning to everybody. I won't get too bad until probably Civil War is where it will start to get super bad. I'm going to talk about her a lot in Age of Ultron as well because that's when we're actually introduced to her. But it's just a warning, you guys, okay? I love her dearly and I'm going to talk about her probably more than Loki. So just get ready. But anyway, I'm going to move on because I'll talk about her more in other movies and I don't need to start now. So logic holes. I'm going to start with my biggest logic hole of this movie and kind of just the rest of the MCU. The timeline of it, if this is a spoiler, I apologize, but Endgame has been out for years, okay? They time travel in that one, right? Steve returns all of the Infinity Stones and then he goes back in time and he stays with Peggy. So timeline wise, what happened was he went into the ice, he came back, lived his life, went back to Peggy after the ice, which means that if I'm understanding correctly, what happened was Peggy married him, had kids with him, right? So then in this movie, she talks about how Steve saved the lives of a bunch of people when he went in to go save Bucky. She talks about how that saved her soon to be husband, which in a weird twisted way, if you really are trying to make it work, could mean Steve. However, why then when Steve is visiting her when she's in hospice or whatever, when she's in the hospital, is she talking about how she wished Steve could have lived his life? Why would she say that if he did live his life when he went back to see her? Another thing I'm not understanding is when Peggy, she's in her hospital bed and she turns back to Steve and she's like, oh my God, Steve, you're here, you're alive, you made it. She wouldn't have said that if they had lived a life together. So I'm kind of confused on how that works. And then also, Steve was able to meet Sam and Bucky on the bench to give Sam the shield. So he's living during all of this as like an old man. He outlived Peggy, which makes sense. He's a super soldier. But then also on her side table, there's pictures of her kids and her, no husband. So maybe it is Steve and she can't have the pictures up because the timeline would be weird if he knew that he went back in time and he was with her and everything. But why would she say that she wished he had lived his life? This is just a part of the timeline that I've never understood. And I don't know if the decision to make him stay with Peggy was decided later on and they had to just kind of make all of this vague, or if this was the decision the entire time and they are trying to throw us off the scent. But it's never made sense to me. And if somebody could explain it to me, that'd be wonderful. But I just don't understand it. And then also, I'm wondering if Steve is the father, where are Peggy's kids? Because they're like grown now, probably, right? Steve doesn't want to meet her kids. If he loves her so much, he'd want to meet her kids. That's weird, right? Or she said he can't because he's the dad and the kids would be weird about it. I'm so confused on how any of this works. And then also, in this movie, it starts off where they're kind of leading us to believe that Steve and Sharon are going to be a thing, which I hate, first of all. But second of all, Sharon is Peggy's niece, which is gross if Steve stayed back with Peggy and married her and had kids with her, because then that's his niece too. I don't like that. It's really icky. So anyway, if anyone wants to explain that to me, I've always been very confused by it. It feels like they didn't plan for Steve to stay behind until later on. It just doesn't fit together the way that it should, I think, timeline wise. It's very confusing. Anyway, speaking of Sharon though, I already said it, but I hate her and Steve together. But I do like that Natasha is trying to get Steve back into the dating scene. I think it's really sweet and it's really cute, and it kind of takes away from the idea that they keep trying to push Natasha and somebody onto us. You know what I mean? At first it was Hulk, it was kind of Steve at some point. I like that in this one, Natasha's kind of like a wingman. So it's kind of less that they're like, Natasha and Steve could be together, right? Do you like this? They should kiss. It's just very like boy girl bestie. And she's like, what about this girl? She's cute. You should ask her out. I think it's really cute. But it also made me think of in She-Hulk, when Jen is like, well, so if he went into the ice at this time and he was fighting, he probably only ever kissed one person. He's probably a virgin. And I think it's really funny because Nat was like, is that your first kiss since 1990 whatever? 90. I don't even think it was 1990, 19 whatever. And he's like, no, but it probably was. Anyway, I think that's really silly. And then I do have a question, logically. The scene in the beginning where they're fighting the pirates and Steve is fighting like the main pirate guy. I don't remember his name. They're doing all of these flips and kicks and twists and it's crazy. And I'm wondering, in Steve's getting ready to fight bad guys training sessions, and he's like boxing and he's punching the punching bag and he's probably boxing other people to get ready for fighting in combat, whatever. Are they also learning tricks and flips and gymnastics and shit? Why are they flipping like that? It looks really cool visually. I love the way it looks as a viewer. Logically though, and practically, it's not a good idea to be flipping like that. If you're doing all of these flips in the air, it's so easy for someone to hit you while you're flipping. There's no way it's practical. I don't understand why they're flipping around like that just to kick someone. Like, it looks cool, but if I'm fighting somebody, I'm not going to be doing flips. And I think the flips that Natasha does in order to take someone down, that makes sense. And the reason why that makes sense is because Natasha's usually smaller than her opponents. So she kind of has to use the momentum of her flip to get them down. But it's not a flip into a kick or a flip over somebody. It's usually a flip to take them down, to use her momentum to like swing them down, because she'll wrap her legs around their neck or she'll grab onto them or whatever. It makes sense for her to be doing flips. momentum wise. But for Steve to, like, I'm specifically thinking of a time where he flipped. It was very cool, but he flipped and he kicked the pirate guy in the face. And I'm not understanding why that is in his wheelhouse of things to do while fighting somebody. But it might just be me. Anyway. Along with that scene, though, this is just a small part, but I think it's really funny that the guy is like, I thought you were more than a shield. And Steve was like, I'll take that challenge. And then immediately won. He punched him like maybe twice, kicked him once. I don't remember. But it was like very quickly that Steve won after putting his shield away. It was just very dramatic. And I think it's really silly that Steve was like, I'll take that challenge. Anyway, kind of going off of that, though, and Steve taking the challenge, I feel like the entire movie, Steve was like ready to kill himself. He just seemed ready to end it all. It just was a very build up to it, but Sam was leading this support group for veterans, and Steve was like, how do you manage it all? And he's learning, and Sam is like, do you ever think about getting out? And Steve is like, no, this is all I know. You know, there's not much else I can do. Nothing really makes me happy anymore. That's sad. He just seems so willing to die on the airship with Bucky. He's letting Bucky beat the shit out of him. Partly because he's like, Bucky, I love you, I'll never fight you. Regain your memories. I know you won't beat the shit out of me because you love me too. But also it's like, he was so ready to die on that ship. He just let himself sink into the water once that ship was down. I think Steve was so ready to just end it all. And that's really sad, but to each their own, I guess. The last logic I have is when Steve and Natasha, they need somewhere to stay. So they go to Sam's house. First of all, Sam is so ready to let them in. And it's because he loves Steve so much. He's like, I got you. He's putting himself in danger to protect Steve, and I really love that. I love Sam. Anyway, they go to his place to lay low, and they've got to take showers and everything, and Natasha is scrunching her hair because she's got naturally curly hair, wavy hair, whatever. And she's drying it with a towel. It's a little bit wet. The next scene, they're both clean. They've got clean clothes, and Natasha's hair is pin straight silky. The most unrealistic part of this movie is that because there's no fucking way Sam has a straightener. He doesn't have a hair straightener. His hair is not long enough to straighten, first of all, even if he did straighten it. How did she do that? There's no fucking way. You're telling me he's got like heat resistant spray shit and a hair straightener? No, he doesn't. How did she do that? And I know that, you know, technically it's a wig, obviously, but like, how did she do that? And Sam, I don't think in the entire MCU do we talk about Sam having a love interest. And if we do, it's very minor and very quick. But he doesn't have a wife or a girlfriend living with him or some feminine energy in his home that would have a straightener. And his hair's not long enough. Men can use straighteners, okay? I'm not saying they can't. I'm saying Sam doesn't. His hair is not long enough. How did she do that? Anyway, I have to move on because it is going to make me crazy. So the technicalities. The first one I have, it's just very general, but this whole movie is just completely made up of fight scenes. And they're all beautiful. I will never get sick of watching this movie, and like 95% of the movie is just fight scenes, but they're so cool and they're all different and they're all unique and they all have really cool flips, which aren't practical, I think, but very cool to watch. Bucky's got that fancy like knife flip thing and they're trying to... The specific scene I'm thinking of is when Bucky and Steve are fighting on the street and Bucky's fighting Steve with this knife and they're both really fucking strong as Steve's got his shield, but Bucky, he tries to stab Steve and he can't, so he drops the knife and catches it with the other hand, tries to stab him with that hand. He's flipping the knife to like turn it from one side of his hand to the other side of his hand, and it just is such a cool choreographed scene. They all are. It's very interesting to watch. I feel like some fighting movies are very boring if it's just fight scene, fight scene, fight scene. Because they're all just like, oh, that guy got punched. Oh, that guy got punched. Obviously, this guy's going to win. But this movie does it so well in that it kind of is like Steve might lose. It's pretty scary. It's kind of like, oh shit, Natasha's about to die. You're on edge and the fight scenes are all so drastically different looking enough that you never fucking get tired of them. The fight scenes are so good. Anyway, whoever thought of the idea of Nick's car is kind of a genius. And I'm kind of sad that Teslas don't do this. I'm assuming. I don't know Tesla, but they can't be this good. And they should. But Nick's car, when he's driving and the police cars are trying to, well, the police cars, I say that in quotes because it's Hydra, but they're trying to ram into him and his car crashes and the car's like, you might have a fracture in your arm. You should try to take this medicine. And it's got the medicine in there. It's got a gun in the middle console. The windows are bulletproof and it's like window integrity 1%. It's so cool how much the car knows about itself and it tells him everything about it. And it's like, well, none of the things are working in this car. And he's like, well, what is working? And the car's like, the AC's working. First of all, that's important, okay? It's probably not as important in New York, but living in Arizona, I'm like, if my AC is broken, I'm getting a new car. I'm not doing that shit. Roll down the windows or something. I guess he doesn't have to roll down the windows because it did break, but still. Anyway, that car is so cool. I like whoever thought of that, and I think they should make cars like that, just in case a police car decides to ram into me and shoot my windows. I would like for my car to tell me when my things are broken and what medicine to take, and to tell me that the window integrity is whatever. I don't know. It's very cool. Anyway, speaking of that scene though, I really love like last minute fight scenes, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it, but in this and also in Iron Man 3, like when Rhodey jumps out of the suit last second, he's like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And the suit opens and he jumps out and punches the person. And in this movie, and the window's like 18%, I'm going to give you this gun. And Nick is like, not yet, not yet, not yet. He waits until 1%. And then he smashes the window with his gun and then kills everybody. It's like perfect timing. He knew what he was doing. Because if he shoots the window with the gun when the glass integrity is too high, it's not going to go through anything and probably bounce and hit him. So he waited until like the very last second, and wow, what a rush. It was beautiful to watch, and he's so smart, and I love last second fight things like that. It's just really cool. Anyway, that's all I have for the technicalities. There wasn't a whole lot. I just think that the fight scenes are just so beautifully choreographed. They're so well done, even though flips and knife tricks are not practical, but it's so cool to watch. So anyway, this whole movie is so chaotic, but I think for me, the most chaotic moment is probably all of the scenes where Steve and Bucky are on that last airship and Steve is trying to get the chip into the thing. They call it Charlie, like what, Alpha, Beta, Charlie, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, something like that. Charlie, though. He's trying to get Charlie into the thing. Bucky is fighting him. I think it's really cool the way that Steve will do a little bit at a time and then fight Bucky and then do a little bit more. Like he opens it up, fights Bucky. He tries to take the thing out. He fights Bucky. He tries to put the thing back in and it falls and he's got to go get it and he's still fighting Bucky and then he puts it in. He's been shot. I just remembered that actually, that he's been shot before he lifts the thing for Bucky. Anyway, Bucky shoots him. And then he puts Charlie in and then they stop it. And then he tells Maria to start firing the airships at each other, even though he's still in it. Literally a death wish. He's trying to kill himself. But anyway, he is trying to get Bucky to regain his memories and he's letting Bucky beat the shit out of him. And he's been shot and Bucky gets trapped under the metal and he is letting Bucky out. And he's like, you know me. No, I don't. Anyway, that's just the most chaotic scene for me. They love each other so much. Well, Steve loves Bucky so much. Bucky doesn't really remember right now, but Steve gets shot and then he's letting Bucky beat him up and he's probably going to die. And then he starts drowning in the water. It's just so much happening. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, even knowing what was going to happen. So that's the most chaotic scene. And that's all I have. So I'm going to end with one of my favorite quotes from the movie. It's the scene where the council is coming together and they're talking to Pierce. And we just find out that Natasha has that face mask of that lady from the council on. And Pierce is talking. Natasha reveals herself and she's like, I'm sorry, did I step on your moment? It's so cunty. I love it. She's so cool. So anyway, that's all I have. Thanks for listening. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram or on TikTok, I am at PHILM Phuckery. And if you are listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube, just know that this podcast exists on both as Philm Phuckery with a PH for both. If you enjoy listening to me and or watching me talk about Marvel movies and just ramble about things that I care about, I would appreciate if you would like and subscribe and download and comment and follow me on things and tell your friends, tell your family, listen to it on road trips, listen to it while you're doing laundry, while you're taking showers, while you're, I don't know, sweeping, doing household chores. That's when I listen to podcasts. If you've made it this far, I would appreciate if you would either comment or let me know on Instagram or TikTok what I should do for my upcoming commercial episode, which will be after Civil War. Anything that isn't Marvel, I would love to watch it, talk about it, and that's all I have. So I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next week for Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay, love you. Bye.